Welcome to MMA Fancast. My name is Luke Pace, and welcome back to everyone who's already a subscriber to the channel. If you're not already a subscriber to the YouTube channel, please subscribe so you can see more great interviews, including the one coming at you right now, fresh off of his first amateur MMA victory, is Joao Martinez. Welcome back.
Hi, Luke. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you on. I've had you on a couple times. You have fought a few times, but this is the first time you've got a long-awaited, very well-deserved win. So let's talk about it. It was for Brawl in the Burgh 21 for 247 Fighting Championships, held just last night, April 20th, at the Hollywood Casino at the Meadows. So talk us through it. Ended up being a decision win for you. So a lot of good cage time for you. Talk us through the fight.
So at the beginning of the fight, actually started with the walkout. Kind of messed me up a little bit because usually DJ Cake's pretty good for the walkout songs, but she flipped her songs. So when I saw Nick walking out and I heard my song, I knew that was going to happen. And I like to visualize and put myself in the fight and what I know is going to happen. And one of those things that I can guarantee is going to happen is I'm going to walk out to my song. So as soon as that happened, that really like tripped me up a little bit. But yeah, I just walked out there, had fun. And yeah, everything was good. I listened to my corners, got a little sloppy at the end of the first round, not too active in the second. So I'm a little disappointed with my performance. The win felt great yesterday, but as soon as I woke up this morning, I watched it back and I was just so disappointed. Like it didn't last as long as I wanted it to. And I'm just ready to get back in the gym and work on the things I need to work on.
Well, I think it's good to have both emotions. I think you can hold on to the win excitement a little bit, but I also think it's realistic to say, hey, now that you have gotten a win, it's time to improve. You were improving even in a couple of losses, but obviously getting a win is what's really important. You got the win. I think it's great that you can now visualize, since you're a visualizing guy. I think it's great that you can visualize now what it looks like to win, but how you can make it even better. So now you start improving some of those things. What do you remember from round one? Let's go round at a time. Since it ended up being a decision win, what do you remember from round one?
Well, from round one, I was able to read him a lot faster than I usually am in my other fights, and I was just extremely calm. Compared to my other fights, I thought I was calm during the Ratani fight, but it was just way different this time. I was aware of everything that was happening, and I felt like myself being set up or setting him up very well. And then around the last like 10 seconds of the first round, I wanted to get active and I just got sloppy. I went and charged in. I did the exact opposite of what everything that I read in that first round was telling me to do, and everything my corner was telling me to do, and I got clipped.
And what was it like recovering from that? Obviously, if you're going to get clipped, which you don't want to do, but if you're going to get clipped, having at the end of the round where you can make it to the end of the round. So what was it like recovering on the stool and then come back into the second round?
I recovered pretty quickly. I actually recovered while I was standing up. It took him a little bit to get the stool in the cage.
Right.
But yeah, once I recovered, I just realized like I need to stick to what I'm training. I don't need to get sloppy. And I knew what he was going to do. I kept controlling his hand and I was letting him close distance on me and walk me back to the cage. When I was watching the fight back and listening to the commentary, like I know it's not their fault, but it was kind of annoying me because obviously they don't know what's going on in my head. But I was aware that I was being walked back because every time that he was walking me back to the cage, I was taking steps backwards intentionally, controlling his lead hand. And it was frustrating him because I was swatting at it or grabbing it. And it was making him throw those like sloppy overhands or straight punches just because he thought he had an opening when I knew that's the only thing he could have possibly thrown. Yeah, I'm kind of losing my train of thought right now on.
Oh, no, that's okay. And I think there's something to be said, having been on commentary a long time. commentating, I wasn't on it this time, but commentating is always live too, right? So sometimes if commentators rewatch the fight, they might have pointed out things differently too. So just depends. And a lot of times your style or someone's style may not be apparent to somebody who's cage side, because you're going with what works inside the cage. I often encourage, I know sometimes fighters like to watch the replay back with commentator because sometimes it points out things they like or, things that they can work on to improve or, good tips, just overall entertaining. But I also think it's completely fine to watch back the commentated, I would say, even the ones that I play-by-play or did color for without volume, because you're a fighter, you're looking more technical. You're not always looking for what's going on as far as crowd pleasing and, and some of the stuff that's talked about for crowd. So if it is something that kind of annoys you, at least because you've already watched it once with the commentator, it might be good to turn it off just so that you can rewatch it from more of the technical side of things that you're looking for that. What did you think about this being primarily like a kickboxing Muay Thai fight within MMA? Obviously, it was still an MMA fight, but you guys seemed pretty comfortable making it like a, like a kickboxing fight.
I thought that it was just the smartest thing to do. There was no reason to take it to the ground because everything, well, up until the second round, everything was going my way. Like ring control wise, I guess you could say that I was getting walked back, but like I said, the majority of that was intentional. I was setting up traps because I was landing when he was walking me back. And around the second, it was like towards the end of the second round, I realized that he wasn't falling for the traps anymore because he kept walking me back. And then when he realized I was going to land on him every time he threw a powerful shot, the last like 20 seconds of the second round was just like circling around. And in that moment, I was thinking maybe I should make it more of an MMA fight and try to take him down. But when I went to the corner, they just told me be more active. Just start setting up your own stuff. Don't wait for him to throw and counter. And that's what I did at the beginning of the third round. We just started throwing. So I also do want to say, there's people in the crowds saying, we were too nice to each other or it didn't look like we wanted to fight in the second round. I don't know about him, but for me, that was not the case. It was just that like setting up the traps. Like I said, whenever he was walking me back, I noticed that he was creating those openings and he just stopped creating them. And in a 2-minute round, it might look like we don't want to fight.
Well, I always give you the opportunity to share, so I appreciate you sharing to people if they're making that comment. I can see how, in general, whether it's football or baseball or basketball or soccer or fighting, it's always going to look different to a spectator or even sometimes to a coach. Obviously, coaches know a little bit more because they're dialed in what you're doing. But as a spectator, things are always going to look different than if you're actually out there. So I think it's great that you very respectfully kind of pointed out your perspective. I certainly didn't get that at all. I mean, 2-minute rounds, adjustments. Sounds like adjustments were being made on his part, which hats off to him for making those adjustments. But that obviously means that you then have to adjust to his adjustments. So that's what was happening. Clearly, the third round, and for people that may not be aware, because sometimes when decisions are read and scores are given, not everybody knows. I believe, if I remember, the score was 30-27. All the judges saw you winning every round, and sometimes a 10-9 must system, which is actually a holdover from boxing. Maybe eventually they'll change it. Sometimes people don't realize that you can win 10-9 in a relatively, let's call it a slow round, or relatively a round that doesn't have a lot of action. And you can also win 10-9 in a round that has you winning majorly. Like 10-9 can sometimes not reflect exactly. So you winning 30-27 is as dominant of a decision win as you can get. And that doesn't mean, and sometimes people don't understand this, it doesn't mean that you dominate every single second of every single round for it. I mean, that would be perfect, but that's rarely the case. It means that you've done enough, struck enough, controlled enough, or aggressive enough, those type of things to get the judges. Speaking of the judges, when you were coming out of the third round, actually, I guess let's talk about the third round because you said that was the second. The adjustments were happening in the second. You were given the advice by the corner to go on the offensive, be more aggressive, as opposed to setting up traps and counter striking. So how did the third round go for you?
I think the third round was probably the best display of skill that I've had in any of my fights. I think if I'm counting all of my fights, the performance I'm most proud of is my fight with Ratani. but I don't think that like skill wise it showed how good I was. I think that third round of this fight, um, I just controlled positioning, controlled the timing. Everything happened when I wanted it to happen. So I felt great about the third round.
Well, it makes sense that you would. Glad that you're reflecting both back to the retaining fight and this fight because you're going to take pieces from all your fights, the fights you win, the fights you lose. You're going to take aspects of them that you like, that you didn't like, that you want to improve upon. I mean, I think that's always a great mindset to have. How confident were you while you were waiting? You've been to the decision a couple times before, I think. How confident were you when you were waiting that this was going to be your debut win, that your first win as a fighter? Or did you think there was a chance that they might see it the other way? I don't think so since it was 30-27, but what was going through your head mentally and emotionally?
Yeah, I knew I won. That's not like a dig at my opponent at all. It's just that the first round was my round, minus the like last 2 seconds where I got hit a little hard. The first round was 100% my round. The third round was 100% my round. The second one, I guess you could make the argument because I was being walked back, but again, he didn't land anything. And anytime he threw something, I punished him for it.
Well, there you go. And even if it had been a 29-28 on all three scores, which it wasn't, but even if it was, that's still a great win. So I understand why you were confident. You figured you definitely got the first and third. That's 29-28. Even if they given him the second, which of course they didn't, every judge saw it 30-27. What's your takeaway from it now? What's your plans going forward?
My takeaway from it now is that I need to fight someone that's going to force me to go to the ground.
Mm.
A lot of people might be underestimating my wrestling or my jiu-jitsu, but I use the things that I know how to do when I need to use them. And if I don't need to use them, there's no reason to. So I want to fight someone that's going to force me to use those things. And I got my eye on two people who just recently fought each other at Brawl in Burgh 19. And that's James Stevenson and Christopher Pierce. They're both wrestlers. They both have that style. And I think there's a good story to be made because Christopher Pierce lost to my teammate, Zach Snyder. And James Stevenson trains out of the shop and with Gavin Teasdale, who's going to be fighting Lucas. So if any of them want to fight me in June, whichever one takes it up first, that is what I'm looking to do next.
Awesome. I appreciate you coming prepared with your mindset of who you might want to call out. It's kind of nice that you have two people in mind that you'd be willing to equally fight, which I think is great. I always give a shout out to legendary matchmaker for 247, Jim Mooney. He likes it when fighters have interest, right? That's the fight game. Fighters can't fight without there being two people agreeing to it. So hopefully one or even both are interested. Jim has told me, sometimes when you, let's say you did a double call like that, you're willing to do either. Maybe you get one in June and maybe the other one's already matched, kind of for the next one, because sometimes that's what ends up happening. So obviously I think that's great. It's also an advantage. 247 just celebrated its 5 years. This weekend was the 5-year show. And I think, being there from the first show, there wasn't fighters that were used to first show. There couldn't have been fighters that were used to fighting for 247. But now that it's been here 5 years, there's fighters like you, there's fighters like James Stevenson and Christopher Pierce, as you called out, that have been fighting for 247 that can watch each other, look at each other, like you were saying, and kind of see styles and see what happens and sometimes call each other out and lay out, future plans. You also mentioned a big pro fight that was already announced, that was actually announced at the Sprawl in the Burgh 3 event the night before you fought, which is obviously exactly what you said, a great matchup between Stout and the Shop, Gavin Teasdale versus Lucas the Sniper Seabird. They already had a huge matchup, as you're very well aware, at Sprawl in the Burgh 2. That was very close. It was a very close match, but it was no gi and, of course, was not professional MMA. So it is the next level for them both being professional MMA. I think it's a great matchup. And, maybe that'll end up working out for you. Ideally, you get matched, you're back on to talk here before your next fight, particularly if that's June 29th. I appreciate you coming on. Best skills to you and everybody. The Pittsburgh area is just so, and all of Western Pennsylvania, including you mentioned the shop and the double champ trains, Ethan Wolverine Goss trains at Gorilla House. And even though they're not necessarily strictly Western Pennsylvania, that whole area, Pittsburgh, all the way to the shop. And Gorilla House is just loaded with talent. Can't wait to see you in your next time. Congratulations on getting your first amateur MMA win. You really deserved it and earned it very strongly. This is Luke Basin for MMA Fancast. Special guest tonight, fresh off his win, was Joao Martinez. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me on.
You got it.